Hi, this is Tracy Taylor with the Wasatch Taxpayers Association. We are doing some candidate interviews for the June 25th Republican primary election. And today we have Bob Adams, who is running for county assessor. Thanks for meeting with us, Bob.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you give us a little overview of yourself and maybe explain why you're running?
Well, as you indicated, my name is Bob Adams. I am running for Wasatch County Assessor against the incumbent. My background is in public management. I have a master's degree in public administration from the Brigham Young University and an undergraduate degree in criminology from the University of California at Berkeley. My background professionally was that I was a city manager for over 30 years, but in city management for about 40 years. I've done some consulting work also for local governments, and that follows my experience of a personal nature. I've been married to Trixie for nearly 50 years. We have 3 sons, 4 grandchildren, and I believe in good government, and I think that's why I can add something here.
So what made you decide to run for office?
My decision to run for office pretty much was dependent on the experiences that I was having, and also with some of my friends and neighbors. We were very frustrated with the treatment we received, and we felt there was a type of arrogance. For example, a friend of mine who was complained about his taxes and how they assessed it, because he disagreed with the assessment as well. They told him, well, you should move to Idaho where it's cost less, or maybe you can't afford to live here, rather than trying to really be helpful. That is, the public can be your asset and a friend, and that's who we're supposed to be serving as elected officials. And so that's what prompted me to run. I saw that as bad government. I became frustrated with at least two of the experiences that I had with the office. The one was they wouldn't provide me with the information that they were basing my assessment on, or how they appraised my property. Yet they asked me for mine, and then they discounted it, but then they wouldn't show me theirs to make sure that I knew that they were looking at the right comparables, because I do know something about appraisals. As a professional manager, I bought and sold properties for fire stations, police stations, parks, a lot of economic development projects where we had to package the land to attract the right kind of tenant for the city that we were working on to make sure that we had things going. So I felt that I was very frustrated by it. The next frustration, sort of was the straw for the camel's back for me, was I had bought a piece of property and filed all the proper paperwork as a residential property. It wasn't a primary, but it was a residential property, and they misclassified it. I immediately brought it to their attention. They said, well, don't worry about that tax notice. We'll send you a new one. You just pay on that. Well, I waited a couple of months. That was, I think, August or September, and by the end of November, I still hadn't received a new tax statement. So I went into the treasurer's office and I said, well, I'm supposed to be getting a new tax tax bill. So what should I do? I said, well, just come back when you get the new one. I said, will you waive late fees and penalties? And they said, well, sure. And I said, can I get that in writing? And they would not provide it to me in writing. So they were too busy or whatever the reason was. So I just paid the whole thing. And then later in February, when I finally did get my tax, 3 months later, when I finally did get my new tax bill, I went in and asked for a refund, and they said, well, you just need to file it online. Well, when I filed it online, I found I had to pay $50 to correct their mistake. They had my paperwork 30 days ahead of the deadline. I had done it properly, and they admitted they made a mistake, and yet I had to pay $50 to get my refund. And it was just, I think, inequitable. It was not fair. Paying for, having to find their mistakes and pay for them myself really was frustrating.
So if you are our new assessor, what are the top 3 things at the department that you would like to clean up, work on, make it more efficient?
Well, I think efficiency is the word that I would use. Cleanup, I don't know how much cleanup is actually needed until I got in there and really assessed that. But to me, there don't appear to be any performance standards for the appraisers. We're having, 2,000 challenges a year now, and many of those challenges are being won by the public. And most of the other people that are frustrated with the process don't even apply because it's too difficult. So the first thing I would do is want to see which appraisers are having the challenges and which ones are losing the challenges, and start developing some performance standards for the appraisers so we can be more consistent in how we appraise property. Because right now you can look at neighborhoods and the tax information is available online. You can find that your neighbors pay totally different than what you do. Some have been reassessed, some have not, and it's all over the board. It's not equitable. And to say that it is equitable is not true. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is that the state audit completed an audit about 1.5 years ago, and it has a list of the deficiencies that exist in the auditors, in the assessor's office. I would come up with a plan. I would read the audit and then look at all the findings and then respond to each of those findings. Those that are possible to fix, we would fix immediately. Those that are going to take more time or need more resources, we will identify and come up with a plan on how we will achieve that. But in other words, respond to the audit, to the findings in the audit, and come up with a plan to implement those findings if appropriate. Sometimes findings don't need to be changed. You just identify them and know that that's an issue, but it's not a fundamental issue, so you don't really need to correct it. But certainly you've got a tool with the audit to know what's wrong and how to fix it. And there were some recommendations. I would look at those recommendations, and I would probably be prone to follow the recommendations of the independent state auditor.
It's pretty well known that you don't have an appraiser's license in the state of Utah currently.
Correct.
Can you explain to the voters what that process would entail for if you get elected? How are you addressing that, and what's your plan of action? And also, what do the laws say you have to do and when you have to have your appraiser's license by?
According to what I've been told by the county clerk and the incumbent assessor, I would have 3 years from the time I take office to become a certified residential appraiser. That's what's required by the law. You don't have to be a general appraiser. General appraisers can also do commercial property. And the incumbent is not a commercial appraiser, although he says he just hired a commercial appraiser in the office. Before that, he had to contract for that service. So anytime that there was an issue, that's very simple to do, is to find somebody that has the expertise and hire only the expertise for the time you need it. One of the things that's happened in the office is they've increased the office tremendously. They've got, I believe, 9 appraisers, and they've added some office staff as well, so maybe 12 or more people they've added. And I don't know that they've ever done a study to see if maybe they should have contracted out for that and it would have been cheaper and more efficient. For some reason, government has a tendency to, and that's one of the problems with the inefficiency in government, is they will throw more employees at a problem without knowing how they're going to deal with that, without knowing the cost. And with employees, you have salaries, you've got retirement benefits, health benefits, you pay for sick leave, holidays, vacations, and you have them on 24/7. Year in, year out, you have those employees always on staff, whether you need them or not. If you contract for services, you may pay more per hour, but you only use them for the hours you need them. And so the end result could be cheaper. That's never been looked at, to my knowledge. And that needs to be looked at. There needs to be an assessment of that, some analysis of that, and be open-minded. That I've never heard people say, well, government's way more efficient than private business.
Right.
And so where you can use private business, I think you need to commingle those assets.
So, and that sounds to me like that does not require an appraiser's license to do those evaluations of the department.
That's correct, and that's more of a management function. The appraisal issue, which is the question you asked me, and I didn't answer it directly, so I apologize for that. But I decided that if that's probably an issue. So I decided at my own expense, on my own time. I am currently taking the classes. I've already passed 2 classes and have the certificate, so I've been told it's difficult. I can tell you that my master's program was much more difficult. And I had to pass 3 days of comprehensive exams, 2 written and 1 oral to get my degree, plus write a thesis. So to say that this is something that's difficult for me, it may be difficult for some people, but I've been involved with education, and I've educated myself and continue to educate myself on things that I've needed to know. And I think that that's not a problem. So I expect to have all the classes completed for the initial phase, and then I would need time to get, you need some practical experience, and that takes 5 to 6 months to get. So I would perceive that within the first year, I would probably have the certified residential license that I would need, or the certification that I need to be an appraiser.
And what experience and knowledge do you have right now that would help you determine some of this analysis of the department that you're talking about? You know, what's your past experience? What are, you know, what previous jobs did you have?
Well, I can say that when I started out, I worked for a man named Ted Gabler. And Ted Gabler became my mentor. And he was a co-author of the book, Reinventing Government. And primarily his focus, and became my focus too, because I worked for him, was that we wanted to make sure government was responsive to the people, was efficient, and was run more like a business. In other words, we wanted to make sure that it was cost-effective and efficient the way we did things. And that's something that I don't believe has been done in Wasatch County at any level. But that's definitely something that I think we do, and I think you can partnership with the private sector, and there's things you can contract out. And in the past, I've contracted out for police services, but that was with county, so it was another government agency. We've hired, inspections, inspectors that were private sector inspectors to do inspections on city stuff, on city things. I worked in a city that was a city of 25,000 people, and we have 35,000 residents in Wasatch County, so it's comparable. And we ran it with a staff of 22 permanent people, and everything else was contracted out. And it was very much efficient, it was very cost effective. Now there were some idiosyncrasies about that community and where it was located that made that convenient, make it possible, so that has to be considered also. But we contracted out for, it was a private sector contractor for garbage. It was a private sector, well, it was a district for fire, so that was, we contracted with another government agency for the fire. But there were all the different levels. Planning, we also, the planning review services we hired with the county. In other words, we only hired for the time we needed the people, the expertise. And the rest of the time we didn't have on payroll. And so even though it cost us a little bit more per hour, the end result on an annual basis was cheaper. And so that's one of the things that needs to be looked at, is can we be better and more efficient and less expensive to the taxpayer?
Also, since the Wasatch Taxpayers Association has been very involved with the county and the county assessor in the past 5 years trying to have a more equitable and fair system, there are state codes that are currently not being followed. There's some improvements over time with the actual assessment in the county trying to get everybody caught up. But I'm talking about the state codes and some of the issues. Can you explain to the voters why this still is not cleaned up and we're still not following state code?
Well, I think part of the problem with answering that question is the assessor's office is like a stealth government agency. We don't know everything that's going on in there because it's very secretive, and they get defensive. And I believe that the reason they get defensive is because they're not as competent as they believe they are. And the first thing that happens with people that are not competent is they get defensive. Rather than, they think that what happens is you get into a position and you believe that you should know all the answers because you're in that position. And not one person doesn't know everything. And so you need to be able to use, whether it's the community, and I believe in citizens advocacy or citizen review committees. I've used committees, again, it's the same city that we did all the contracting out. We had over 100 committee and commission members of the public, and they were all volunteers. It didn't cost the city money, although we did an annual dinner for them to recognize their efforts. But there was a tremendous amount of expertise in that community. It was well educated, very professional, and they had a lot of expertise on how to analyze things. And so we used the community and didn't fear them, because some of them were smarter than we were. And so why not? And they wanted to improve their community. They weren't out after our jobs. They were just out to, they were concerned and wanted to help. And I see, especially since I announced my candidacy, I've been contacted by a lot of people that are in that category, that they just want to improve what's here. They're not necessarily want to change anything, they just want to be helpful and make improvements so we can assess all the properties in our community. Wasatch County has not been able to do that. We've had some assurances in some of these public meetings where our assessor has told us that we're doing all these things now. But in my experience, the best indicator of future performance is past performance. And so if we haven't been making it, what's changed in the last 10 years? Because the incumbent has been part of the office for 10 years, has been the assessor for 3.5 years. He should have been able to identify the problems, and he should have a plan to implement the changes. He may not have been able to address all the changes, but there's no plan in place on how we're addressing it. Just his assurance that we are getting that done now. I hired a lot more employees, so now we can do that. And I'm not sure that was the most efficient way to go, because they didn't look at contracting out at all.
Right. Is there any subject that I haven't brought up yet that you would like to address and talk to the voters about? Well,
I think the primary thing is, you know, one of the criticisms they've leveled at, the other side has leveled at me, is that I'm not an appraiser. He is. I look at that as being a one-trick pony. He's an appraiser, but that's all he is. I've not seen management ability or analytical ability or anything as far as how he provides things. That to me is a concern. I've not heard about other studies it's very easy to do a request for proposal and to have those for those services, and then compare them to what it's costing you in your government budget to what the private sector can do for you. And if it's turnkey, if they don't do the job, you don't pay them, or you have to only pay them a certain amount if they don't do the job properly. In other words, if you have a lot of appeals and a lot of the appraisals and the assessments get overturned because of that, then they're not doing an effective job. And that's what I'm talking about. We need to put performance standards in the department. There don't seem to be any. Maybe there are, but again, it's a stealth operation. We don't know what's going on in that department. And so that's why I don't know what everything that needs to be done. I know where I would start, though. I would start by analyzing, talking to the employees, getting their input. I certainly want to get their input, and then, you know, how do we make the department better? What are we doing that's not good? What are they doing that we like? What makes them feel uncomfortable? And then the other big thing that I think we should be doing is advocacy. The advocacy is two-part. One for the citizens. Well, it's always for the citizens, but one is for the people that are going through the appeal process, so they know what the process is, how to appeal it, what's an appropriate documentation that they need to provide in order to get it through, and sort of help them with that process. You know, again, we shouldn't claim to know everything, and if we make a mistake, bring it to our attention. We're going to try not to make mistakes, but those things happen, and that's not a problem. But to get defensive about it and say, well, no, it's not because I'm an expert and you're not, is not a good answer, and that's what we've had in the past. The second part is to use the state agencies for assessors, the organizations for all the assessors in the state, and see if we can't get some changes made at the state level by lobbying the state legislature with what's going on, because I'm sure every assessor in the state's getting kicked in the teeth over these assessments and the tax bills. And so if we can put a cap on the amount of increase every year for people that are existing, someone who's buying a new home is going to pay more in taxes because that's their expectation. But somebody who's a senior citizen on a fixed income, and all of a sudden you're doubling and tripling their property taxes, that is an inconvenience. And for the younger people, I even got contacted by a young couple that had barely put enough down, 5% down for their down payment, and had to have an escrow account for their property tax and for their insurance, and their payment doubled in 1 year. And if you've got 3 young kids and only one of you work, it's a very difficult situation. So everybody is really hurting, and some of the businesses are talking about leaving also because their property taxes jumped as well.
Right.
When they finally got around to assessing them.
Right.
So that I see as a real problem.
I just want to bring up this letter that I had received through the campaign emails, and it is a citizen in our community that went to the state tax commission appeals process and said, you know, some pretty straightforward things were not done by our county assessor. Can you address that letter, please? Sure.
She is supporting me, but I think that she's supporting anybody that's not the current assessor. But she's according to her letter and her testimony, she says that the judge felt that the assessor was not doing his job, was incompetent. I think there are other things. The other thing that's happened, and this has not just happened to her, but to other people that have appealed. You're supposed to have a discovery supposed to be 10 days before your trial date or your hearing date, and he gets the information to you a day or two before or the day of, and then they just go ahead and hear it anyway before someone has had a chance to address it or to at least comment on the assessor's findings or the assessor's determination. They're talking, you know, I'm looking at the highlights here. Some of the things they didn't do. The submission does not demonstrate, or does not demonstrate. Okay, I'm sorry. He did not make adjustments for the comparable sales, which is something assessors have to do, and I know that from some of the classes I've taken. There were other things in it that showed that he didn't have a good working knowledge of the law, which I thought was very damning. He should have at least gotten, he's got a county counsel's office there. He should be able to get some information on how to interpret the law if he can't do it himself. But I've read law before, and I do have a basic understanding of the law because I've had to implement those things and also control them. But I would say that this is just an example of what happens to people when they go before the tax commission and how he responds and what the findings are that they're not doing their job.
And
that's basically what the letter says.
Do you have this posted on your Facebook page or anywhere where
Not
people
yet.
can go read it?
I'm thinking about doing that.
I would put it up there, let people read it so that they understand what we're talking about.
The letter did run in today's wave, so what's the date today? We're
June 5th.
Thank you, June 5th. So in the June 5th copy of the wave, the letter is in that.
Okay.
But it's as a political ad. It's not a letter to the editor if you're looking for it.
Well, why don't you give us just a summary of why the voters should vote for you? And thank you again for meeting with us.
Well, thank you for having me. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. I believe, I'll make it real short because we've been talking for quite a while. And I would say that if you like your assessments, vote for the incumbent. If you don't like them, vote for me, and we'll try to get some changes made and make sure it's fair and equitable. And we will respond to the audit, the state audit, and make sure that we at least address those findings. Whether we're able to correct them all or not remains to be seen, but we will identify what we can and can't do, and then we'll see if it's important enough that we should attack the ones that we can't get to, or if that's something that can happen later, as long as it's fair and equitable for everyone now. And
Great.
So I would encourage your vote. So thank you very much for considering it.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks for watching. This is the Wasatch Taxpayers Association. There's going to be 3 other interviews, so also make sure you look in your mail for your ballot. They're coming out today. They should be out by the June 7th or 8th, so please vote June 25th. Thank you very much.